After WW1, many countries fell into collapse, crippled economy, reduced military, and ravaged cities after a brutal four-year war. One of these countries was Germany. They lost over 5 million people in the war and losing a lot of land they once had. Some lands lost were a few provinces in France, Belgium, Poland, and even Denmark, despite them not even being in World War I. Austria-Hungary was not much better. In fact, they collapsed entirely into many countries like Yugoslavia, Romania, Hungary, Austria, and Czechoslovakia. For the Ottomans, they had to fight an independence war from many invading and rebelling nations, while also dealing with Turkish nationalists who took over the monarchy, ending 750-plus years of rule of 5 million square kilometers. Slowly but surely until 1923, using guerrilla tactics and the Allies just getting out of a major war only to fight another one in Turkey, they win and secure independence with help from Savior, a Turk. Let's go back to Europe. The Polish are about to take advantage of the Soviet-Russian Red Army being a 5-year state of war White Russia and allied forces and invaded key regions and made it to Kiev despite just formed a month before. At the Battle of Kiev, however, the Soviet Red Army was more brave than ever, so not wanting to lose to a bunch of Polish citizens, launched a costly 100,000 casualty operation and defeating Poland at Kiev. It seemed like the Red Army was about to conquer Eastern Europe, with them pushing back Poland all the way back to their capital, Warsaw. However, the Polish citizens really didn't want to be slaves of the later formed Soviet Union or USSR, so they counterattacked at the Battle of Warsaw and pushed back the Soviet Russians all the way to where they were before the war started. So, they signed a white peace with the Soviet Union, ending the war between Poland and Russia, at least for now. Meanwhile, back to 1918 defeated Germany, they also had a revolution in Bavaria, killing thousands, causing Kaiser Wilhelm II to abdicate and flee to the Netherlands. The newly formed Weimar Republic by the British Franco Treaty crushed the revolution by February on 1919. Because of this, the German economy was basically bust, and that seemed to be proven after a meeting between a German chancellor and a British economist and French leaders, discussing how Germany needs to pay. The conversation basically went like,
"So we seen that our nation hasn't paid its war money since 1919. Care to explain?"
Well, our money is broken. And?
Well, the US gave you $700 billion, so what did you do with that, huh?
Because we may have bought a printer to print money.
Well, since you didn't pay, just look at your Western ruhr lens in 2 months. Bye.
Wait, why did France mention the Ruhr in 2 months after finding out that Germany didn't pay? Let's go back to the German map. Okay, I found the reason why he mentioned that. Oh, it looks like the French were pissed after he spread the word from the meeting, so with the Belgian help, a joint force invaded and established the International League of Nations occupied zone in the Ruhr region. This made Germans furious, but for now, they had to deal with it. On top of that, in 1932, the United States was flexing their money muscles until they did it too much and the stock market crashed, causing the whole world to go into an economic depression, hence the name Great Depression. Thousands of people around the world had no jobs, and 500,000 soldiers from around the world left the army in many countries, and the continent that was hit the hardest was of course Europe. Germany's economy was already bust, so when this hit, they started using that printer they bought a lot more, but it made it a whole lot worse in Germany, as if you print money, it becomes more worthless over time. For comparison, in 1909, one piece of bread cost 4 German marks. In 1932, it was 4 billion marks for half a piece of bread. But wait, guys, we have looked at the Soviets in a while, so it's time travel time. In 1922, after the Soviets won the Civil War, Lenin staged a famine in the Soviet Union, killing 600,000 mostly Russian people overnight. When he died, he said,
"Is thy rainy last wishes, Savior Lenin?"
Just don't let Stalin take over.
Well, he's already taken power.
After Stalin took power, he invented his 2 5-year plans to turn a farm-based nation to an industrial-based nation, but after a key Soviet general died in 1928, he launched the Great Purge, killing 60,000 generals and civilians, for he declared, "There are enemies in the Soviet Union. They must be purged." Now, let's go back to 1932, where Japan withdraws from the British-led League of Nations and invades China. But why are they doing this? We need to time travel way back to 1895 and 1918, where they invaded China and took German colonies in the Pacific, causing their economy to be bust by Britain and even the United States, making them angry. When Russia tried to gain influence to Korean rebels, they went to war, and shocking to European nations, Japan won and kept Korea. Now, in 1930, Chinese-Japanese rations were relatively safe. That was until 150,000 Japanese troops crossed the border into Chinese Manchuria. Italy in World War I was a victory for Italy, but they never gained more land than they were promised, so when Mussolini, a fascist father they say, took over Italy and began modernizing the Italian state. When Italy invaded Ethiopia, they saw defeat the first time in 1895 and almost saw defeat again, but violating the 1925 Geneva Convention, he used chemical weapons on the Africans. Then, in 1936, he wiped out 50% of Ethiopia after his annexation. This caused Italy to be kicked out of the Allied powers and suspended from the League of Nations. Due to this, Italy wanted to invade Albania to secure access to the Adriatic in case of a Greek-British invasion from there. They succeeded in this war. While these wars were going on, Spain was also converting to fascism, but it was a lot harder, since they had no money problems that Italy had, so it erupted into a civil war with the Republicans, aided by the Soviet Union, UK, and USA, while the fascists were supported by Italy, Germany, Hungary, and Japan. After 3 years of brutal fighting, in 1939, they signed peace at Madrid, letting the fascists take over. And of course, the country that was broken the most the interwar period, Germany. After a funny mustache man took over Germany's parliament, he turned his nation into a fascist dictatorship like his fellow friends in Europe and Asia. He violated the treaty when he rearmed the army to 600,000 men and used some of it to occupy the Ruhr back. The Franco-British Belgians did nothing. Next, he demanded Austria join Germany, which they publicly accepted, but privately hated this aggression. Meanwhile, the Japanese violated the truce of 1933 and attacked China again. They swept through cities like Beijing and Shanghai and committed atrocities in their occupied regions, further swaying relation between USA and Japan. Germany's next goal was to invade Czechoslovakia, but it first wanted to take Czechia's most defended region, as it had ethnic Germans in the nation. They held a conference with Britain and France, and without letting Czechoslovakia know, they took the land. Chamberlain went home in excitement, thinking appeasement was his best victory, until Germany violated the Munich Conference and invaded Czechoslovakia, slaying relations with the Allied nations. At this point, Germany is about to invade Poland, but that isn't in the interwar period, so I will have to end this video. This took me hours to draw the meetings and rooms, the speeches, the mapped out invasions, and more. Thanks for watching and see you next time for the detailed version of the Russian Civil War or Revolution.